So for this problem, we'll deal with we'll be trying to check if a subarray exists within the main array. So we'll use the same example. Say we're given marks from a class. We're given an array of marks from a class, which is just random numbers. Let me just put 30, 45, 60, 70%, 80, 55, 60. I'm just putting in random numbers out of 100. So those are percentages. 24, 92, right? So if we have a class that has this type of performance, this is just an array of marks from a certain class. And the question is, given a subarray or submarks, let's say we're given a shorter array, a smaller array or submarks. Let's just call it submarks. So we have it as a 60, 70, 80, 80, 43, right? So the question is, given a subarray of this marks, can you check in the main array if we have this sequence within the main array? So that means if we have this sequence of 60, 70, 80, and 43, if it exists in the main array. So to do this, we can start with 60, the index 0, and check if it exists in the main array. So you see at index 0 in the main array, we have 30, it's not 60. 1, 2. At index 2, we have 60, which matches index 0 in the subarray. 70, we have that. 80, we have that. 43, we don't have it. We have it as 55. So here, if it's 55, that means your function would return false. But then if we have our subarray as 55 here, it would return true, right? So let's just keep it this way as a true, then we'll change it later and see if it will give us false too. So writing our function, we can start by the same process we did last time to find our function. Let's just say check, let's name it check marks, or let me just call it check submarks, because we're checking if the subarray exists in the main array. Let's call it check submarks, right? And our inputs here, we have marks, and then we have submarks, because we're trying to check if they exist in the main array, marks. So the first thing we do within our function is initialize the index in the first index, so that's 0, right? In the subarray. So we can have sub marks index equals to 0, right? Submarks index is equal to 0. That's too long, but it's okay, I'll just type it out. So we have the submarks index is equal to 0. So we can say if we have the subarray, so this if statement, we can just say, okay, actually let me start with a for loop. We can say for mark in marks. So this for a value in the first array in the main array of marks. So we can say for mark in marks, if the first thing I'll check is I want to make sure that the subarray of submarks, it's not equals to 0, right? Actually, we can just use the index we have there at submarks. So if submarks, because we already initialized it at 0, we can say if submarks index is equals to, so we can say the length of the subarray, which is equals to length of the subarray, it's equals to length submarks. So if it's equals to the length of the submarks, the length of the subarray, then we can say if it's 0, then there's no need to do anything. So we can break right there, right? But then if it's not, but then if at index 0 within the subarray, at index 0 submarks, so we're saying at index 0 or at index submarks index dx. Typing it out, it's going to be a problem. At index 0 within the submarks, if it's equals to the mark we spoke about up in the for loop, if it's equals to the mark in the main array, that's for mark and marks. If it's equals to that mark within the main array, then we can say that let's add 1 to the index, right? So we add 1 to the submarks, is it marks index. So we add 1 to this. So that means we go into the next index within our subarray. So we started with 0. So from 0, If 0 is equals to the mark within the same array, then we add 1. That means we go from 0 plus 1, it goes to the second index, which is 1. Then 70, we check 70. If it exists, then we say plus 1, then we jump to 80, then we add 1, 55, until we confirm that the entire subarray does exist in the main array, right? So after doing this, if this is true, then we want to return true or false. So we can just return sub marks index is equals to len sub. So we want to check this throughout the entire length of the sub marks array, sub marks. So this should be our function. So we have the first index is equals to 0. So we say for a mark in the main array of marks, if the sub marks index, which is 0, is equals to the length of the array, then we can't check anything. So we say sub marks index is equals to 0, then we break, we stop right there. But then if at index 0 we have this, whatever value at index 0 is equals to mark, then we add 1 and check the next one until we confirm the entire array is equals to the length of the array. Okay, it's just syntax, sorry about that. So here we can say, after this function runs, then we get, I'll just use the same marks we have here. We can change and play around with them after it runs, but since we know this ones will return true, we already checked that 60 exists here, 70 is here, 80 is here, 55, and they follow the same sequence, then it should return true for us. Then let's have our print statement here. I'll copy and paste it. Great. So we have our print statement here with the same input marks and sub marks. Let's see if it runs. True, perfect. So we have true here for this array, because it's subarray, because it exists in the main array. Let's say we change it and make it 33. We change our subarray and just make it 33. You see the sequence, we can't find it here in the main array. And try run it, let's see if we'll get a false output. False. So that means our function is running properly. So the question was just to check if the subarray exists in the main array, and this is what we have.